Today, we're going to be looking at some 3D Scooby-Doo games. An exploration Metroidvania style game, a weird costume changing game, and the Luigi's Mansion ripoff you've never heard of. These are some of the only and most faithful video games to the classic Scooby-Doo show, so I think it's worth checking them out. And after we've looked at each one, I'll rank all of them from worst to best at the end of the video. All of this is coming up on today's episode of the Infinite Bits Halloween Extravaganza. All right there, I finally caught you, Mr. Ghost Halloween decoration with a witch hat. Now it's time to see who you really are under that mask. Oh, you were really just a copy of Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights this whole time. Never would have guessed. Okay, now, this was a game that actually came out on all of the 6th generation consoles. It came out on the PlayStation 2 and GameCube in 2002, but I'm playing the Xbox version here that, for some reason, came out a year later in 2003, but they were all made by Heavy Iron Studios. Now these guys actually made a lot of licensed games back in the mid-2000s. Games like The Incredibles, Ratatouille, and most notably, the cult classic SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom, which even got a remake recently. But even before they made Battle for Bikini Bottom, they made this game. I gotta say, just bringing out this console again makes me realize how solid of a build this console was. No red ring or anything. Just look at this bad boy. And the controllers, geez, are they ever bulky. And I'm using the slim version too. The originals were even bigger than these. They also had these weird black and white buttons here too, that eventually got turned into the bumpers on the 360 controller. But it is still a pretty solid controller. Microsoft got a lot right for their first home console. Anyways, let's put the disc in and see what all the hype's about. When you first load the game, it starts with this awesome intro that recreates all the scenes from the original show intro, but with the environment and models from this game. And if you compare this one to the show's intro, it's exactly the same, frame by frame even, using the same monsters. It's pretty neat. Then once we select a new game, we get a cutscene of the gang talking about the mystery they're about to solve, just like the show. Basically, you gotta look for Daphne's friend's uncle. Yeah, seriously, who went missing. And you explore this creepy manor to look for him that has also been infested with monsters. And I gotta say, all these cutscenes make you feel like you're right in a Scooby-Doo episode.
Jeepers. Don't worry, Holly. We'll help you look around. You said it, Daphne. We're not afraid. Right, gang?
Wrong. Well, like me and Scoob have seen this show before. You guys can go poking around scaring up some spooksters, but we're staying right here in the old mystery machine. Only ghost-free environments for us.
And yeah, you're hearing that right. This game actually has a laugh track in it, and it's pretty funny. It adds to the game's charm. It even plays when you do funny things in the game too, like ride on these tire swings for example. Then we get to the gameplay, and it's pretty interesting how the game is laid out. It's structured like a Metroidvania game, but has a lot of elements from a collectathon platformer game as well. Right off the bat, you can explore any area that you want. However, most locations will be locked off until you get a specific item or something, in which you can later come back to. These items are like ability upgrades of sorts that let you interact with the world in new ways. These are things like the spring that lets you double jump, the helmet that lets you kill these monsters, and even the hilarious lampshade and slippers that lets you sneak by monsters. This game's funny, I'll give it that. It can get kind of annoying though when at points they give you pretty well no indication on where to go, and it'll happen a few times. But what about the map, I hear you say? Well, take a look at it. You get more confused looking at this thing than actually exploring. I can't even make sense of it. However, all the areas that you do explore are pretty cool. You got the main mansion itself, of course, the gardens, and even a close-by fishing town. These all feel right at home for a Scooby-Doo game. But besides the exploration, this game is actually mainly a 3D platformer, and these parts of the game were kinda just alright. It's pretty basic and pretty standard for an early 2000s 3D platformer. But what made this part worse is how you have no control over the camera at all. This can make it hard to accurately judge where you are in the 3D space. Like what? How did I even miss that? From my angle, it looked like I hit it. And also, your shadow that you would normally use to position yourself in 3D platformers like this doesn't always load right away, so that made this harder as well. And also, with this camera thing, I just want to look around in this environment because they got the atmosphere perfect in this game. The main collectibles here are these Scooby snacks that are used to open certain doors, much like the notes in Banjo-Kazooie. But unlike Banjo-Kazooie, where the notes were used to lead players in a certain direction, these Scooby snacks are just placed literally everywhere. Sometimes with no rhyme or reason. I swear they're used to fill up the screen space. After a while, it got annoying to collect them, but at least there's a ton of them so you can skip some and still be fine. Overall, the gameplay here is pretty basic, I'll say, but what really sells the game is the atmosphere, music, and characters. They all make you feel like you're right in an episode. And this game is absolutely packed with a bunch of references from the series, like how every monster you fight was a main villain from an episode of Scooby-Doo. And then there's the boss battles. While the fights are pretty standard, they all have original, fully voiced music pieces that make you feel like you're in one of those monster chasing montages from the show. Take a listen.
Velma's waiting, hanging from the tower so high, with the Black Knight there to stop you. He's not gonna let you by.
So the next Scooby-Doo game came out in 2004, just 1 year after the Xbox release. And this game was called Scooby-Doo Mystery Mayhem. Now, even with the pretty great game that Heavy Iron Studios just made, the series was now handed off to a new developer this time. Maybe the publisher, THQ, wanted Heavy Iron to develop to their other licensed games, which they did, but the Scooby-Doo series was now handed over to the developer Artificial Mind and Movement, that's now known as Behavior Interactive. These guys also made a bunch of licensed games back then, but were mostly on handheld systems, and I can't recall as many great ones compared to Heavy Iron. But what the hey, let's see how this new developer compares with the previous one. Well, it literally starts off in a very similar way. They recreate the Scooby-Doo opening with the assets from this game, and then it starts with the gang in the van explaining stuff about the mystery at hand. However, the rest of this game is completely different than the previous one we looked at. This time it's like a puzzle adventure game. You have to find certain keys, clues, or other items in order to progress the plot. But what is drastically different this time is how you fight enemies. You use the power of reading. Okay, it's actually just this book you find, and with this you can suck in various enemies by slowly draining their health, and once it's at 0, they get locked in the book. It's honestly kind of an interesting game mechanic, but nothing crazy. I can still respect how they went for a totally different direction for the sequel though. Also, you can't just suck up all the ghosts right away. You have to find their pages first, which then allows you to capture them. This is actually an interesting twist because of how the monsters seem a lot more threatening at first when they're invincible, essentially. But at least they provide you with these hilarious costumes that you use as a disguise to sneak by unnoticed. This time the game is broken up into 5 different chapters, and I really like this structure. Instead of one big mystery to solve, you have mini mysteries for each of the levels, and there is also one overarching mystery as the plot too. Think of it as playing 5 different episodes of the show. This really helps the pace as it always keeps things fresh. Plus you get to solve a bunch of mysteries and the locations are always something new and interesting. You'll be exploring Wild West theme parks, haunted bayous, and my favorite stage, the movie studio. This place is so cool. You see all these backstage areas, these different props and sets. There is literally so many cool things to discover in this location alone. You can actually play a Scooby or Shaggy this time, and while that does seem cool, and I'll admit, it actually is pretty cool, it's pretty pointless too, as there are virtually no gameplay differences between the two, except for like how Scooby can crawl in small spaces, but that's about it. And I don't know, for some reason, the controls can be really wonky this time, cause you turn like a truck. Your turning radius is randomly so wide this time because you have to do this big circle to turn around. And you do kind of move slow in this game too, but these are minor things really, nothing too distracting considering it isn't a platformer this time. This game overall I'd say looks better than the last one. The models look a lot more fine-tuned and all of the colors pop out a bit more. The animations look a bit more natural as well. However, while the atmosphere is good, I'd say it's not as good as the first game. The music is more generic and the locations feel less mysterious. The writing, characters, and monsters are all up to snuff though, and definitely make you feel like you're in the Scooby-Doo universe. And they added a controllable camera in this game, which was much needed. Don't know what else to say about this statement. I mean, it's a camera, but one thing with this is that you can choose to invert the camera or not, but it actually doesn't work. Like seriously, I tested this because I wanted to change mine to inverted, but nothing changed whatsoever. What? This was probably like an oversight or something. Oh, and then I experienced this other glitch where these mummies just didn't attack or chase me at all, and just stood there. Then they would always go back in their coffin where I couldn't even attack them. And I had to kill these things in order to progress, so I was stuck. But luckily I just went in and out of the room and they all acted like normal, so we good. So after what I thought to be a pretty good follow-up Scooby-Doo game by a new developer, came the last Scooby-Doo game on this generation of consoles, and once again, it was released just 1 year after Mystery Mayhem in 2005. This is Scooby-Doo Unmasked, made by the same developer as last time, Behavior Interactive. Alright, last game to look at here, let's see what we got. Once again, the game starts in the same way. Intro that mimics the show's intro, a briefing in the van, and then we get to the first area. I mean, hey, that's how the cartoon was, why change it, right? And once again, the graphics and animations look slightly improved from before, so that's good. But what is immediately apparent is this new art style with these black borders around the characters. And personally, I wasn't a fan of this look. I think Mystery Mayhem actually was overall the better looking game because of this. But the gameplay is once again changed up in this game. They went back to only playing as Scooby this time, but now it is more combat and platforming focused with little to no exploration elements. Which is a shame because the exploration fits so well for a Scooby-Doo game. Your attacking moves have been way more fleshed out than any of the other games though. You have so many moves at your disposal. There's a spin attack, a roll, a slide, and a ground pound. Plus, the whole gimmick of this game is that you can transform into various costumes with their own set of unique moves. Now, this sounds all good on paper, and it is kind of fun to try out all these different moves, but literally the combat is so basic since all of the enemies can be defeated with simply just your standard attack. You have camera control again, thankfully, but funny enough, this time there isn't a menu option to invert the camera. So I guess they couldn't get the inverted camera to work in the last game and just gave up here. That's funny. Along the way, you always have to be collecting this thing called Mubber. Yeah, that. And you use it to make other costumes which give you new moves. And again, this seems kind of cool, like you find a new currency to get new abilities, but the way they implemented it was just annoying. Basically, each transformation machine doohickey, you have to pay individually. It's not like a one-time fee that permanently unlocks it for all machines. So a lot of the times you have to lose your costume because of these lights, and then you'll need to recollect Mubber just to unlock the same costume but in a new area. And your Mubber count resets too, so it's not like you can save your Mubber from area to area. This makes it always a constant grind to collect this stuff. The other half of the gameplay is the 3D platforming, and this time they give you a lot bigger platforming sections to traverse. And these parts do the job, they can be fun, but all these sections seem a lot more generic this time. That's a complaint I have with the whole game actually. It just doesn't feel like a Scooby-Doo game as much as the other ones. It just looks like any other generic 3D platformer from this time era. This even extends to the monsters, music, and even characters. They all lost a bit of the charm from the previous games and went more basic. So yeah, I'd say the atmosphere took a downfall for sure. There are still certain moments with that charm, but it's not as jam-packed like the other ones. But the game structure is almost like a blend of the last two games. The levels itself are in a very linear fashion, but they're connected by these mini hub worlds. And I say hub worlds plural, since there are 3 of them because this game is broken up into 3 different episodes. Which is nice, I do like how they kept the episode format, and you know, it's actually pretty good to use these hub worlds as you go between the different levels, so I like it. However, there's really not that much to do in these though. And really, after Unmasked, all Scooby-Doo games just kind of faded into existence. Sure, there was a few more games that released on the consoles after, but they weren't based on the original cartoon anymore, and had this honestly quite bad art style that just made it look like some sort of mobile game. I think these were like tie-ins for some live action movie that was coming out around then. And after that, there really hasn't been any other Scooby-Doo games at all for that matter, so it was kind of a rare feat to have these 3 games really tie into the show like they did. I mean, there was a few games before this on previous consoles like Creep Capers and Cyber Chase, but they were kind of mediocre games and didn't really pull you into the show like these ones did. But if I had to rank these, it would probably go like this. First of all, I'd have Unmasked as my least favorite, just for being the least inspired game here, with gameplay that kinda got boring after a bit. And then out of these 2, I actually enjoyed my time with both of them, but in the second place spot, I'd have to go with Night of 100 Frights. Because this is a love letter for anyone who watched the cartoon, with all the references and such. And the gameplay, while fun, it has its flaws. So that means that Mystery Mayhem has edged out the competition. And this is because, while it doesn't have as many references as 100 Frights, you still feel like you're right in an episode of Scooby-Doo. And I like the puzzle adventure gameplay style more for a Scooby-Doo game. And that is it for today, so on to next week's video. It is the finale of the Infinite Bits Halloween extravaganza, so I'm gonna need something special for that. And I think I put it around here somewhere. I can't seem to recall. Oh, here it is. I'm gonna need this vacuum to suck up some ghosts, so I'll see you guys next week.